I'm of the firm belief that both Escape from the Planet of the Apes and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes are severely underrated. I love both of these movies, to be honest. They're not the best of the series, or the original series, that would still be the original Planet of the Apes. However, I feel like with the original being so good and then the remake trilogy also being so good, I feel like these two movies get swept under the rug. And I feel like that's a bit of a shame. But hopefully these reviews, both today and Wednesday, will bring some new eyeballs to both Escape and Conquest. So with that out of the way, let's get into talking about Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
Escape from the Planet of the Apes.
Escape from the Planet of the Apes was directed by Don Taylor, and it sees the return of actors like Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter as Dr. Cornelius and Dr. Zero, respectively, with new actors including Bradford Dillman, Natalie Trundy, and Eric Braeden. At the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Taylor destroyed the world. However, just before he pulled the trigger, Dr. Zira, Dr. Cornelius, and Dr. Milo all escaped, and they basically went through the same time warp that Taylor had went through, ending up back in 1970s Los Angeles. They are studied by a presidential committee and eventually embraced by the greater public. However, there are sinister forces at play, including Dr. Otto Haslin, played by Eric Braeden, who, after learning about what happens to the human race from Dr. Zira, comes up with a bit of a plan to, let's just say, future-proof the human race. Like I said, Beneath the Planet of the Apes ended the series, or at least ended the timeline. But the movie was a financial hit. And so 20th Century Fox was like, we've got a problem. Because the Earth was literally blown up by a massive atomic bomb. You can't come back from that unless you do a full-blown reboot, which I imagine Fox didn't exactly want to do, especially in the early to mid-70s, where both Planet of the Apes movies had done fairly well financially. Fox would end up consulting Paul Den, who had written the previous movie, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, as well as original Planet of the Apes author Pierre Boulle, to try and figure out something of a story for what would end up becoming Escape from the Planet of the Apes. There was something of a satire planned in the form of a movie called Secret of the Planet of the Apes, but that never saw the light of day. But it was eventually decided that just because the timeline ended, that doesn't mean we can't go backwards. And so, for all intents and purposes, from Escape to Battle of the Planet of the Apes, it basically exists as showing how we got to the original Planet of the Apes. So the series acts, in a way, like a circle of sorts. Of all the Planet of the Apes movies up to this point, this was the most rushed in terms of production. Fox only gave itself 6 weeks to film, edit, and release this movie. The Fyre Fest guys are saying that's not enough time. Adding on top of that, the movie only had a production budget of $2 million. So, an accelerated production schedule and the lowest budget of the series so far. These are all massive red flags, but somehow, some way, this movie ended up not only being a critical success, but a financial success as well, making $12 million on a $2 million budget, which is a fairly good number, especially back in the 70s. And like I said earlier, I think this movie is very underrated. This one and Conquest. It's not perfect, that being Escape, but when the movie hits, it really hits. Gives the movie its backbone is the performances, specifically from Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter. Let's talk about Kim Hunter for a minute, because she absolutely crushes it as Dr. Zira. This is not only her final outing as Dr. Zira, but this is her best one. In my research, I found that she was quoted as saying that she was happy to return back to the role. However, after this movie was done, she was glad that she was no longer required. She and McDowall felt like they were pretty isolated because they were the only ones, along with Sal Reno, I believe that's how you say his name, as Dr. Milo. They were literally the only ones in the ape makeup, but they both delivered. Kim Hunter was just excellent, and she just carries the emotional heft of the movie. But not far behind in terms of quality is Dr. Cornelius, played by Roddy McDowall, who would later go on to play his son Milo in the movie. So Roddy McDowall, to my knowledge, is the only actor to play both a father and a son. I'm sure there are other examples, but I can't think of them right now. When Zira, Cornelius, and Milo land in Los Angeles, they're initially treated like royalty, but then when more scrupulous eyes take a look at them, you you tend to see the claws come out, and that is exactly what happens. Specifically from Dr. Haslund, played by Eric Braeden. That's another performance that just absolutely crushes it. He is the definitive villain of this story. However, he is not pure evil like, say, a Dr. Zaius or an Ursus from Beneath. In his mind, he's saying, these apes are going to take over the world. Well, as long as I'm breathing, that's not going to happen. So it's not truly like, hey, it's like a mustache twirling kind of thing. It still sucks that what he does, but in his mind, he is doing it for the right reason. So there is a great deal of nuance there. Nuance that I appreciated. For the third movie in a sci-fi franchise, there's a lot more going on with this role and this performance than I could have ever anticipated. When the movie is focused on the humans and the apes trying to figure out what to do with each other, it's really great. There are some scenes, though, and they're not in the movie much, but they definitely slow the movie down a bit. Like when, for example, the apes are being shown around LA, they're decked out with all these clothes and hotel rooms, and that's fine and dandy and all, but they're not as interesting. What is interesting is the scientists trying to do their thing, Dr. Haslund trying to do his evil thing, and basically trying to deal with the problem that is at hand. I loved that. I'm going to talk about the ending of the movie because it is rather depressing, so spoiler warning. If you don't want to know, skip to this time code. Essentially, with the help of other human scientists played by Bradford Dillman and Natalie Trundy, they being Zira and Cornelius escape with their new baby Milo. However, Haslund catches up to him and kills both Zira and Cornelius and seemingly their child. However, what Haslund doesn't know is that Zira swapped babies before they left, basically giving Milo up to his new handler, I guess, or father figure, named Armando, played by himself, Ricardo Montalban, in a brief role. This ending is so dark, but it honestly works because what this movie's been building up to is, can you change history knowing what happens? And this movie posits the ending of no, no, you really can't. And if you try to interfere, you're low-key going to make things worse. I love it. I love the spirit of it. I'm going to give this movie a great rating. I was going to go full amazing, but some of the, hey, they're in the 70s stuff was not a detriment, but it definitely felt like a waste of time overall. The rest of the movie, though, is high quality, and I recommend that you check it out, especially considering that the original is so beloved and the remake trilogy is so beloved, and yet Escape and Conquest are also really good, but no one talks about them. So if you have not checked out Escape and Conquest, do yourself a favor and check it out. And speaking of Conquest, that is what I will be covering this coming Wednesday. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes.